Okay, so we're back at the toe of the boot. After doing the heel sanding, I think that was just kind of a step forward before actually doing this. I finished all of the pegging here. Not sure how blown out this is, if you can see, but there's now 2 rows, and so that this is all like nice and snug. I have slight concerns that maybe some of these pegs aren't deep enough because I was doing it with my hand instead of hammering it in like before. Like it might have the opposite problem that I had in the first boot, where first boot I pegged it in too far. This one I may have not pegged it in enough on some spots, but it seems okay. I guess we'll find out when we pull the last. But it seems pretty snug. If you can kind of examine it. When I was going through this part right here, it was still pulling like a little bit like loose, and so I added a few extra pegs in right there, and I got those ones in very deep on there. I was even considering getting there. You can see a couple, like if you really get the right angle. I mean, no one will ever see in practice, just because no one looks at boots like this. But you can see some of the pegs in right here, and I might at some point put a couple drops of glue in there if I can get it in there well enough, and really just try to secure this up here. But I think it'll be okay. I might actually reinforce this area with a few more pegs just to be sure that it's structurally sound. This is the tricky instep I was mentioning before, because that's the part where this insole is bending the most, and it's going to be the hardest, the hardest strain on these pegs. So yeah, I'm actually probably going to go through and put another row of pegs right in here. So this is just like triple pegged. I didn't have the same problem on the other boot, but that was because they were pegged in so deep. But now that all the pegging is done, we're going to start doing the stitch down. So you can see, so here's the last, and you can see how this part is already tucked in. What we're going to want to do is come and put in a line of stitching all the way around here as tightly as possible to the last, to really get the shape of the boot going. And we're going to do that step by step. So first off, we are going to need, what do I have in my thread? I have a thread around here somewhere. It's I just had, oh, here it is. So it's 1 millimeter tiger thread. This is the cream color, just because this is what I have. I mean, you can get white, you can do whatever color you want, but we're gonna do about, you measure out how long it's gonna be, and on a thin project like a wallet pocket or something, you measure out 3 times the length that you need. There are 3 times the length of the distance you're going. But for this, because it's going to be so thick, it's going to go through at points the midsole and 2 layers of leather. It's probably safe to say you need at least 6 lengths, maybe 7, just to have a little comfort to work with in case you snap the thread, which happens a decent amount. The thread will break. Not really break in the center, but like just fray near the ends from getting pulled through the holes so much. It's very hard on the thread to pull it through the tough midsole. So, and you're not going for speed here, so just take as much as you need. I went with 7 lengths. I did 8 before on the other shoe, and it actually was like way too much. And I got 2 needles, and I'm gonna double lock these. I had to triple lock with the thinner thread, but double locking is fine on this fatter thread. if I can get it through the hole. It's currently 1 a.m. on a Saturday night, Sunday morning, which is the perfect time to make boots. I kind of got it in my head that I was going to finish these tomorrow, which is why I'm doing this so late at night. And I'm probably only going to do a couple of these stitches on this video and maybe turn off the video just to get the idea of what's going on. Okay, that one threaded a lot easier. Some people, actually most people, the proper way to probably do this, in fact, is to use a stitching awl, which would be a lot quicker. And I have one right here. It's not like I don't have one. I'm not doing it because I don't have one. I have this thing right here. So basically, if you get one of these, it has this little spool of thread. The thread comes out this little hole, spool goes in here, and it wraps around this thing for a little bit of tension, and it comes through here, blah, 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 and it feeds through that, and it pokes through this needle, and then basically you're emulating a sewing machine as you go. And so you poke through the initial hole, and then you pull out like a length and a half or 2 lengths of this out on the bottom of the shoe, and then on the top part, so you have one end that's all the way pulled out, and then on the other end that's pulled back out of the thing. You're constantly going and making the holes and doing like a lock stitch. So you pull it down, make a little loop, thread that bottom feed that you created already through it, pull it back out, go to the next one. So it's all a one-step process. You're doing the awl and the stitching all at the same time. The problem is that I was using one of these awls right here, like cheap Chinese steel, and I don't know if they're steel, but whatever metal they are. I was using one of these and it snapped off and went through my thumb. And I was bleeding everywhere. So I decided that I don't like it. Do not want to use these anymore because these needles want to break on me. They're not very sharp. They're not pushing through very effectively. So I have instead started using just this. It's a round awl that I bought. It was a nicer one. I forget where I got it on eBay, but it was, $15 after shipping. But it's a lot nicer. It's a lot stronger. It's poking through everything really well. And it made the first boot really easy. Having a good awl and good needles is a really important thing. My first few projects I had really awful awls and really awful needles, and it makes everything terrible. It makes just the whole thing unfun. What am I looking for? Oh. So here's the thing I'm going to use to mark the stitch. It's a 3mm Tandy stitching iron thing. And basically, I want to start the first stitch to overlap on just from the midsole over to this, the stitch down area, to the upper. I'm going to come in here at an angle. Got my round head mallet, and we don't have to poke this all the way through. We just have to mark the stitch, and we want to get it you want to feel where the last is, where the insole is, and you really want to get that stitch like right in that nook. And we'll mark a few of them actually. We're going to come right in here and try to get this nice and tight so we get the good shape of the shoe as we start stitching. So now that I have a few of these marked, I actually wish that one would have probably been in a little bit further. It might look a little weird, but I'm probably not going to use that all hole. Yeah, so got my awl. I'm going to come in here. You may not be able to see this really well, but yeah, let's just go through it. I'm going to be poking in, just making a hole. I'm doing it at a very extreme angle, actually, to try to... The reason I want to go at an angle is because when I'm pulling the thread tight, I want to pull this in even snugger, more snugger on the last, to really shape the shoe. And so I'm really just coming in at an angle, and I have some cork down here so I don't poke through into this stool that I'm working on. So yeah, that one went through. And then now that you have a couple holes poked and a few more marked, you want to start stitching, because you don't want to go through and make all the holes and then start stitching, because sometimes as you tighten things up it can kind of move a little bit, and then you're going to be bummed out that you already made the holes, because it won't line up anymore, and it'll be wasted work, and you may end up with holes that you can't use. And yeah, it's just one of those things. You want to kind of tighten it as you go, and this is going to shape the shoe as we go and make the next hole easier to make, because like you can see down here, this is all slacked out, and we're going to have to shape that. But if we keep shaping it every single stitch as we go, it's going to kind of naturally take that shape and make it a lot easier. And just be consistent with how you stitch on these things. Like I personally, so I'm pulling the needles through. I always pull up and back on this top thread that comes in. I always go through the top first, pull up and back, take this bottom needle, and then you can kind of pull the top needle to kind of open up the hole. And you may end up having to awl it out twice, because it may be, a lot of times these midsole holes can be really tricky, and just be very careful that you're coming back out through the proper hole up here in your stitching, just like basic stitching stuff. And then you pull it tight, and there you go. You have one stitch down, and then you get your awl back out. You come to the next stitch, you come in at a nice angle, and you poke the hole, and then you pull it out, and this awl is made in an awful shape. It wants to roll off every single surface you set it on. Then you come in, poke your hole through, up and back. Second one through. Have some pliers ready, because you're probably going to need them to help you pull these needles through these tough midsoles. Tighten it up. 2 stitches. Yeah, and then you're just going to repeat this all the way around this whole thing, making sure this midsole is nice and snug to the against the insole and the last, and just taking this in as tight as possible to shape the shoe, and trying to get all that slack out, and just go step by step all the way around this whole thing as closely as possible as you can to stitch. And then you go all the way around the other side, so you just do 1 stitch over the edge over here, and then you call it a day. And then after that, we're gonna go glue on the outsole. Oh, and one other thing, I already, just because it was late at night and I wanted to get my belt sanding done before it got past 10 o'clock so I don't disturb the neighbors, I sanded out this to be just like flat after I did the pegging. I would normally do it after I stitched all this, but it doesn't really matter that much. But yeah, I just wanted to flatten this out a little bit so when we glue on the outsole, it has a flatter surface to glue to. I don't know if you can see how flat that is now. It still has a little bit of curve right here because I don't want to go through the midsole because then it'll compromise the structure of the midsole and the ability to resole it in the future. But yeah, it's a little bit flatter than it was before. Should be good. Anyway, that's that. I'm gonna go through and stitch down this whole cap tail, making sure to get both layers here like nice and snug together, and then I'll come back and we're gonna pick out the last. Hopefully it'll come out.